Thank God it's Monday. It's time for All In, episode number 7. This week we look at 10 principles of personal development. Hit it, Elizabeth. You are listening to All In. I'm your host, Jeff Roper. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you live out the mission of God in your life and around the world. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast today. I want to thank you for joining me for episode number 7 of All In. I'm coming to you today from our apartment in Athens, Greece, right here in the heart of this ancient city, just a few metro stops away from the Acropolis and all the amazing things that one can find in this city. Hey, if you find this podcast helpful, would you mind spreading the word about it? Help us by telling your friends, maybe sharing it on Facebook or Twitter, and just help us get the word out to help more people. Today I want to do a 2-part series that I'm titling 10 Principles of Personal Development. This began a few years ago when I was asked to speak at a leadership seminar, and they asked me to talk about how do we develop ourselves? What do you do to cultivate your own personal life? And so I wrote out some basic principles that I've discovered are guiding my life that up until that point, even though I was aware of them, I had never actually reduced them down to writing. And so I wrote them out, and I've shared this on a number of occasions in different venues, and it's been found to be helpful for some people, so I thought I would share it with you today. If you find it enjoyable or beneficial, why don't you send me a note, let me know how it's helped you. And if this type of podcast is useful for you, then maybe we'll do more of them in the future. First principle that I want us to look at is principle of destitution. That is, that I am spiritually destitute and totally dependent on Jesus Christ. Jesus said in John 15:5, "Without me you can do nothing." Every single one of us must come to grips with the reality that in Him we live and move and have our being, that we don't have strength in ourselves. As St. Paul said in some place in the Bible, "In my weakness, then I am strong." And I have found for myself that when I recognize how dependent I am on Jesus Christ for everything that I have, that I do, my ministry, my life, my work, my breath, everything, it causes my devotional life to be of a rich character and a rich quality. Because once you understand how destitute you are and how dependent you are on Him, prayer ceases to be a problem. It's not a burden. Prayer is not a burden. Prayer is a lifeline. Eating to me is not a burden. In fact, I'm quite good at it. I've done it already today, and I'll do it again later today, because I know my life is dependent on getting good substantive nutrients so that I can live my life. Well, I know I'm dependent on food. I know I'm dependent on breathing. I'm doing a fine job breathing right now. Well, prayer is the same way. My staying close to the Lord, staying close to Him, dear to Him, near to Him is what enables me to live every day of my life. And that is born out of my desperate sense of dependency upon Him. And when you know how dependent you are on Him, prayer ceases to be a challenge. This leads me to my second basic principle, in that it is this: my devotional life must weigh as much as my public life. Here's what I mean. You have a public life, I have a public life. I speak in public, I write, I do a blog, I have podcasts, I minister, I teach conferences, seminars, churches. Well, that's all my public life. But my private life must weigh as much as that. The Greek word in the Bible for worthy means to weigh as much as. In other words, my private world must weigh as much as my public world. That I just can't go out there and fake it in public. If it's not real in my private life, it will not be real in my public life. I learned this principle back in, I think it was probably the 1980s, when I read a book by Gordon MacDonald called Ordering Your Private World. And I'll include links to this in the show notes. This book changed my life in a number of ways. So one of the analogies he gave in that book was about a well-kept garden. Keeping your soul is a well-kept garden. And it formed in me a passion to have a devotional life that was rich in content, rich in spiritual experience with the Lord. I had also been shaped, prior to that, by reading the biographies of great men and women of God, like the Wesleys and Finney, and all of these different people who had an incredible prayer life. And I knew that that was something that I wanted for myself. And so that book, Ordering Your Private World, was very instrumental in helping me cultivate that part of my life. The third principle that governs my personal development is that personal development is all about consistency in the fundamentals. There is no secret weapon to personal development. There is no secret weapon to growth. It is not secret, it is simple, and it is just a simple constant called showing up. Just be there. Sometimes people wake up one day and they look in the mirror and they don't like what they see, and they think, man, I need to lose 10 kilos or 20 kilos or pounds of weight. And so they try going on a diet. I did that one time. I went on a diet and it absolutely did no good for me. I did that diet all afternoon and I did not lose 1 ounce. I did not lose 1 gram of weight. A whole afternoon of dieting. Total waste of time. Well, you and I might laugh about that because we know that you can't do that. That health is a matter of being consistent in the fundamentals. Well, personal development is all about being consistent in the fundamentals. Being consistent in your health, being consistent in your prayer time, being consistent in the basics of life. Sometimes people want to go and find the deep things of God. And, well, can I tell you my experience in that the deep things of God are when the simple things of God go deep inside of me. Things like love your neighbor, things like humility, things like faithfulness, love, joy, peace, patience, all of those basics getting deep inside of me and being consistent in them. Show up every day. Live while you're alive. Okay? Then the fourth principle of personal development that I want us to look at is put first things first. Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you haven't read that book, it is a classic, and I would really recommend that you get a copy of it and read it. And if it's been a while since you have read it, maybe you should go reread it. But he really focused on this, putting first things first. In the book, he gave this analogy of, imagine that you've got a large glass container, and you've got a bunch of big rocks, medium-sized rocks, small rocks, and sand and water that you want to get into that large glass container. And he said, what you do first is you take the biggest rocks and you put them in. Then you take the medium-sized rocks and you put them in. Then you take the small rocks and you put them in. Then you put the sand in the container, and then you fill it up with water. And that's the only way you can get everything in there, because if you start with the water, you start with the sand, it will take up the room that is needed for the bigger things. But if you put the big things in first, the smaller things will build themselves around the big things. Well, that's the way our lives are. Put the first things first. When you wake up in the morning, email is not your first thing. That is not your priority. Email is somebody else's priority. They're trying to sell you something. They're trying to get you to respond to something. They're trying to make a demand on your life. That's not your priority. What is your priority? What are the first things you need in your life that you need to keep as a sacred trust to say, this is the most important thing that I have to do today? There's a book that I read recently called, actually there were 2 books. One was called Essentialism. Outstanding book, I tell you. You need to get a hold of that, Essentialism. And the other book was called The One Thing. And both of those books really help condense all of this cacophony of noise that is demanding our time, our energy, our attention. How do we press through all of that and get down to what is actually essential? What is the not just the minimalist, but the essentialist approach to where you focus on what really matters in your life? Because your life is too short to be wasted with things that don't matter. So put first things first. And I'll include links in the show notes to those books as well. And finally, the fifth one that we're going to look at today, and this is, again, it's going to be a two-part series. We'll look at the other 5 next week. But the fifth principle is, if I do not manage my time, someone else will, and they will always do it wrong. Let me say that one again. If I do not manage my time, someone else will, and they will always do it wrong. There's only one place in our life where we are all equal. Some people are better looking than others. Some are smarter than others. Some are richer than others. But there's one place where every human being on this planet is equal. Since the dawn of creation to the end of time, we all only have 24 hours in a day. That's right, folks. You have 24 hours. I have 24 hours. Now, I know that in this modern world, the mantra is, I'm busy. I'm busy. You know, being busy and exhausted has become the new status symbol. And what I have experienced is the people who complain the most about how busy they are typically the least productive people. Because productive people are not necessarily busy as we understand nowadays being busy. They are highly engaged. Productive people are highly engaged. They are highly self-managed. They are highly self-driven, self-led. But they don't necessarily have a sense of busyness about them. They have a sense of destiny, of purpose, of drive, and intentionality. But being intentional and being busy are not the same thing. Now, there's a couple of resources I'd like to recommend to you if this is an area that you find yourself really struggling with. And most of us do. We have more things coming at us than we can possibly deal with. I read recently that the average American hears or reads 100,000 words every day. Now imagine that. 100,000 words coming at you from every direction. Buy this, avoid that, walk here, don't walk there, read this, respond to that. You know, everything from your Facebook messaging to your Twitter account to your CNN news app to magazines that you might try to read. 100,000 words every day bombarding your mind. How do you cut through all of that to get down to what is needing to be done? What do I have to respond to? A book that really helped me in this, and I've talked to a lot of other people that have been equally impacted by this. In fact, it's probably been one of the most effective books for helping people learn to deal with task and time management. It's a book by David Allen called Getting Things Done. You'll hear it sometimes referred to as the GTD system, the Getting Things Done system. And the book is outstanding, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I mentioned earlier The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That book taught me what I should do. The 7 Habits taught me how to prioritize, how to think about my life and managing and leading my life. Getting Things Done taught me how to do it. You know, it's one thing to have the what to do, and it's another thing to have the how to do it. And David Allen does a masterful job teaching us actually how to get things done and creating systems reliable systems that we can build into our life so that we can constantly be as effective as we can possibly be. An app that you can use on your iPhone and your iPad, and it syncs across all your platforms, at least within the Apple world. I'm assuming that they have something like this for Android, and for the one or two of you out there that may have a BlackBerry, I don't know if it has application in BlackBerry or not, but it's an app called Nozbi, Nozbi, and it is built on the GTD, Getting Things Done system, and it's a great app. You enter a task to be done, and it syncs across all your platforms. Love it. It's a very useful tool. And another tool that I use, another app that I use to help me in this is called Evernote. And I'll include a link to Evernote in the show notes as well. Evernote is this amazing app that, again, syncs across all your platforms. You can put your notes in there, digital. You can be reading, like if you're reading a website about something and you enjoy that, you can just clip on it. You make a clip and it saves it to your Evernote account, so that later on, if you're wanting to do some research into that, or you've read a recipe or you've read an article that you want to access later, it's right there in Evernote, and it's got a powerful search engine on it that you can search through any of your notes based on a keyword. Let's say you're wanting to, I don't cook, but let's say I want to make a peanut butter cake. I don't even know if you can make such a thing as a peanut butter cake. Sounds really good though. And you save that into Evernote and you don't remember where it's at. All you have to do is click on search and write peanut butter, and it will find every note in your notebook, in your whole application, Evernote app, that has the word peanut butter. Great tool. Highly recommended. So next week we're going to pick up here and go through items 6 through 10. So in wrapping up today's podcast, let me remind you the first 5 that we've covered. Number 1 is the principle of destitution and dependency. You are totally dependent on Jesus. And the good news about that is He is more than able to provide every resource you need. Stay close to Him. Second, principle of personal development. My devotional life must weigh as much as my devotional life must weigh as much as my public life. Stay close to Him. Make sure that you spend that precious time, whether it's in the mornings that I prefer, or some of you might be night owls and you like the evenings, whatever's the best time of your day, make sure you give that to God. Third principle, personal development, is about being consistent in the fundamentals. Show up every day. Number 4, put first things first. Number 5, if you don't manage your time, somebody else will, and they will always do it wrong. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. I'd love to hear your feedback on this if it's been helpful for you. Also, just a word of reminder that this podcast is made possible by people like you who support us in our work in making disciples, mobilizing leaders, and cultivating church planting movements around the world. To learn more, you can check us out at jeffroper.com. Talk to you next week. God bless.
Well, we're done now. Thanks for listening. This is Jeff Roper reminding you that the mission of God is too grand for mediocrity or average living. You were created for a purpose, and that purpose is found in the mission of God. It's your life. Now go live it.